John, coming to you from Evolved Custom Rod Shop, showing you my newest project. We are going to be making white grips here today. These are foam core grips with a fiberglass sleeving on the outside. First thing I want to do is make a tape arbor to make sure that this foam core doesn't move around in my mandrel. Just build it up until it's nice and snug. The diameter of the mandrel is a little bit smaller than the foam core, so putting a little bit of tape arbor. I want to make sure this thing doesn't move. The way I'm showing you how to do these grips is not necessarily the only way you can do this. This is custom rod building. You can do this any way you want. First thing I'm going to do is measure out the length of my grip. I want about a 9-inch handle. This is for my own personal rod. It's a 3-piece travel rod by American Tackle. I am using a CCT Arrow reel seat, so I'm going to put an extra 1/2 inch because part of that grip is going to go into the handle itself, into the reel seat where the arrow comes over top of it. So I'll mark it at 9.5 and we'll get ready to cut it. This is a very simple process. Grab your coping saw, anything really. You could probably use a razor blade, whatever you want. I just find this works easiest. You can do this manually. You can just do it by hand. I just spin up the lathe and put my saw down, and that seems to cut a nice straight line. Once you cut through, you're going to take the excess off. If the cut's not perfect, don't worry about it. You can clean it up later with a little bit of sandpaper. Not a big deal. Pop off the excess. All right. Next order operation is put an arbor on the other side. That way it's nice and secure while I'm sanding. Grab another piece of tape. Since I have it so far on the arbor on the left, I'm just going to put an arbor on the right, and then it'll be halfway on each arbor when I'm all said and done. Okay, we started sanding here. Now I want to size up the inner diameter of this reel seat. Again, and this is the Arrow CCT reel seat by American Tackle. I'm measuring the inner diameter with my calipers, and that'll give me my exterior diameter of my foam core. Okay, got a long way to go. I'm just going to take my regular sanding cloth at this point because I don't want to take off too much. If you take off too much material, you're going to have to start over. You can build up a lot of stuff back, but sometimes you can just take off too much and it's too hard to make it back up. They sell the sanding cloth at Mud Hole. They sell the sanding cloth at a lot of hardware stores. I bought it at my local HVAC store. Do a test fit here. You see how it's sloppy? That's what I want. I don't want it tight at this point because I'm putting on fiberglass and I'm putting on epoxy, so I need to make sure there's plenty of room. I'd probably say there's 2 millimeters or 1 millimeter on each side. Now I'm using my other sanding cloth. This is the reamer abrasive. It's like something like 66 grit. I showed you the video on how to make your own custom made reamers. Well, this is the reamer abrasive I used. And I'm just going to take the bulk of it down with this because it works so well. Once you get near the end, though, you want to go back to your other sanding cloth because this is a much higher grit and you're going to smooth out everything. Don't worry if it's not perfect. We're going to be laying down a coat of epoxy that can take care of a lot of flaws. Okay, I'm happy with the shape, happy with the way the handle looks. Next thing I want to do is get my white pigment into my epoxy. Using a 50-50 mix of Pro Coat medium, their standard rod building epoxy, nothing special. This is a CRB white pigment. I'm just took my popsicle stick, grabbed a glob, put it in there, saw how translucent or non-translucent it was, and once I was happy with it, I went ahead and put it on my mixer, my epoxy mixer. Doesn't have to be perfect at this point. We're just getting a coat on. This is going to help seal everything. This will also give us a nice base for the fiberglass to go over top of. My next video, I'm probably going to do one where I paint this to see how that turns out. Once you put the epoxy on, add your heat, get any bubbles out of there. Now to round 2. One thing I forgot to mention is when you're dealing with the white pigments, make sure everything is cleaned up. Make sure you're vacuumed up. We're using 1-inch fiberglass sleeving here. We're going to pull it out, cut it to length. If there's any dirt or debris, it'll get into the white epoxy and it'll show up at the end, and it's not fun. So we're cut out. We got the size we need. I'm just laying it out here so it's nice and easy. I'm going to grab my installing tool, which is just a foam core with a fiberglass top on it. And this is to help me install the sleeving onto the grip itself. I've showed you these in previous videos and how they work. I have 2 of them right now. One's a little larger than this and seems to be work perfect, seems to be all I need. You might need more depending on what your situations are, but I found that 2 works for me. So I got everything set up. Now this isn't like carbon fiber. You're not really straightening out the weave at this point because you're not going to see any of this. What you're trying to do is make sure there's no bumps in the weave. Make sure everything's laying flat. That's really it. You're not worried about how this lays down. Put your gloves on. Get your epoxy. I've already put some white pigment in it. And then we're going to lay down another coat of white epoxy. Before I lay that down, I'm going to do one thing. I'm just going to rough it up a little bit with the sandpaper. Just real quick. All I'm doing is taking off maybe a high spot or something. I don't want to go deep. I'm just putting a little quick rough edge on it. I'll wipe it off, make sure there's no dust on there, and then go ahead and lay down my epoxy. That step's not really necessary, but I like doing it. So this coat's going to be a little bit thicker than the last, but the reality is this stuff, working with fiberglass is completely different than working with carbon fiber in the respects to once you lay that carbon fiber down, it doesn't move. when you lay the fiberglass down, you can generally move it pretty well until you cinch it down, okay, and cinch down the ends. The carbon fiber, you lay it down and it doesn't want to move after that. So you got to be real diligent about where you're putting it on the handle. Usually I cut my carbon fiber a little bit longer than the fiberglass just for to make sure I don't mess it up. Make sure you get the ends and everything like that, and just build it up. Doesn't have, like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect at this point because this is going underneath the fiberglass. Put your epoxy off to the side. Keep this spinning while you're doing this. I'm using my foot pedal. Just keeping it spinning. If a little splatters, it's okay. Okay, now I'm ready to put the sleeving on. I'm going to go ahead and quickly take this out of here so I don't get any drips. And as I'm holding this and handling it, I'm spinning it and turning it. That way I make sure I don't get any drips. And then I just take my installer tool that I showed you and slide the sleeving right down onto it. Now, here's the cool thing about fiberglass. You can see here, I didn't get it far enough to the left. I need more material on the left. So once I start cinching it down, I'm like, oh man, this doesn't, I need to go more to the left. Watch how you can do this with fiberglass, something you can't do with carbon fiber. I literally just move it. Watch, I can bunch it up in the middle and then just slide it down. It, again, it doesn't stick quite like the carbon fiber does. So once I'm happy with its placement, I'll grab my zip ties that I've already set to the side and I'll put them at the ends. There's no complicated shapes in here, so I don't need to put any in the middle or anything like that. I'm just cinching down at the end. There's a slight taper on each end and that's it. There's nothing crazy. I'm going to make sure that sleeving is nice and tight to the epoxy. So we're going to put the other zip tie on. Again, make sure that's nice and snug. And that's it. It's secured down. Make sure everything looks good. Everything's straight. There's no bumps. That's all that matters. At this point, you can probably take your gloves off because the only thing we're going to do now is put more epoxy over top of this glass. Don't forget to cut the ends of your zip ties before you start putting epoxy on. Oh, forgot to do it. It's all right. Just grab some scissors, whatever you got, and just take them off. Doesn't have to be perfect. Now I want to make sure this fiberglass is completely saturated. I'm still using the white epoxy I had before. Back and forth, back and forth. You know, putting on epoxy is its own art form, 100%. You kind of got to learn what works for you. Everybody's got a different style. Once you have good coverage and you know everything's saturated, I'll put it on dry. I'll put it in the tent. I'll apply some heat to it, make sure there are no bubbles, and just keep it protected while it dries. Okay, we're getting there. Looking pretty good. Looks like a solid grip now. See me cutting off the zip tie at this point. Don't really need it. It's already secured. It's already held down with the epoxy. Now I'm going to put another coat of epoxy on here. Doing a real quick fit of the grip. It fits pretty good. Now this is a Scotch-Brite pad. This is not sandpaper. Let me rephrase that. This is a Scotch-Brite pad. This is not sandpaper. I do not recommend using sandpaper at this point. Fiberglass will splinter. Putting another coat on here. Theoretically, you could leave it textured like that. That's perfectly fine if that's what you like. But I like a smoother grip. So I'll build up the epoxy until I have a near smooth grip, and then I will be finished. Again, make sure you get the edges. Apply your heat, and you're good to go. At this point, you can add colors, you can marble, you can do pretty much anything you want on these white grips. I might put some labels in there and cover them in epoxy, so I have like a, advertisement with my website on it. Not quite sure yet, but this is the white grip, and I hope you guys like the video. Please like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon. Make sure you get notified when I do more videos. Sorry there hasn't been a video in a while, but things have been really busy, and that's not a bad thing. Hopefully you find this useful.